Oftentimes we disqualify ourselves before we even really start, or before we really make a habit a new habit, or before we actually break a bad habit. But I want to talk about this simple idea. Always quit tomorrow, but never today.
And who, at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat.
Welcome back to the Winter Arc Podcast. This is September the 13th, and this is journal entry number 10. And so today I kind of wanted to briefly talk about the simple idea about quitting tomorrow, but never today. The idea of if you quit tomorrow, you can do anything. But the simple quote comes from a former Navy SEAL, and he basically has this simple idea that in the midst of making habits, and even in the midst of trying to finish something that is really, really hard to do and really, really difficult to do, that if you quit tomorrow, you can do anything. Now, granted, I'm going to give a disclaimer here because I don't think I think this way, but I think that this will provide value to some people because some people are kind of built this way. But because, like, for instance, the difference between this quote and where I think motivation comes from, I really believe motivation comes from the idea that if I desire change and if I really want to work hard for something, then I'm going to have to want it. There has to be a desire there. There has to be a motivation there. But this quote, and like, even though this quote and this inspiration doesn't really work for me personally, this might work for someone else. But in this quote, this is basically the idea of just as long as you always quit tomorrow, just as long as you never give up today, you can do anything. So no matter how hard the task, no matter how tough it's been, and no matter what habit you're trying to build, just as long as you always say to yourself, I'm going to quit tomorrow, but never today, you will be able to do anything. And so I think it comes to this kind of like mind trickery where you're kind of just tricking yourself into thinking, okay, after today, I don't have to worry about this because it's not going to be my problem anymore. But then when you wake up, you have the same mindset. Tomorrow I'm going to quit, but today I'm not going to quit. So you keep using that mindset over and over and over again, because this is like a part of kind of like the way I think a lot of people actually envision what productivity means to them. And for some people, I think that striving and this idea of kind of promising to quit tomorrow but never today can work for some people. But the problem is that I think people use that as a way to have a blanket statement for like everyone. So a lot of the times people always consider like, oh, well, if this worked for me, the way I am motivated, the way I view productivity should work for you. I don't think that's the case. I think that we all have our different desires, different motivations, and different ways that we view productivity of like what productivity even is and what productivity can be or how it can be achieved. And so I think it comes down to the point of how do you tick? You need to know yourself and you need to answer these questions of how are you trying to get better at XYZ? Or what habits are you trying to break? And what motivations and desires actually change the way you act? Or what is your behavior like? And I think that that's where a lot of people get this wrong, as I said, because like, as I said, this quote, even though it's great and inspirational, it would never work for me. Because I would literally quit the next day with that kind of thinking, honestly. And like, I get the whole point of the quote and I get what it's saying, but for me, that's just not the way I view motivation, how motivation makes sense to me. But I do think that for a lot of people that this kind of striving mentality kind of can work or kind of can motivate someone, especially if you are someone who doesn't look towards the future. If you're someone that looks in the here and now, I think that you can accomplish that because that same the former Navy SEALs talked about the fact that his commanding officer and the people overlooking the program to become a Navy SEAL would always say not only don't quit today, quit tomorrow, but they would also say, just worry about the next moment, worry about what you have to do next. And that's how they would actually keep going long term. Because if you have a really hard struggle and if you have something that seems almost impossible to accomplish, you're going to have to take each moment, each and every single moment with an element of just living in the moment. You can't be worried about what comes in the next month. You can't be worried about what that comes in the next year. You need to worry about the here and now. And I think that some people are actually great at that. But for people like me, right, I'll just use this as an example. For people like me, I think that I really think in the future most of the time. And should I? I don't know. But I think everyone's different. And that's where I've needed to really consider, like, okay, where do my motivations lie? And instead of striving in the moment and trying to accomplish these difficult tasks all at once, I need to be able to incrementally increase the way I do things to be productive. So for instance, like, I didn't just like, it's not like I started and I was just like, oh, well, I'm going to do all the stuff on the list that I wanted to do, the new habits I wanted to create and the old habits I wanted to break and all these other stuff. Like, I'm going to start doing it right now. No, I had to motivate myself and basically be like, okay, I'm going to pick one and I'm going to start this for a week. And then after a week, I'm going to start with 2. And then after 2 weeks, then I'm going to start with 3. Then after those 3 weeks, then 4, and then so on. I think that for me, and I'm not saying this is the truth for everyone, for me, I have been able to take a step back and kind of look at the whole of, okay, these are the goals I want to accomplish. Now, how am I going to accomplish them? I can't say to myself, I'll quit tomorrow, because I definitely will quit tomorrow. If I say that to myself, I'm really good at convincing myself out of things. But if I'm willing to be like, okay, I'm going to start with one thing, and then I'm going to start with 2 things, then I'm start with 3 things, because the problem with me is that I love just jumping into something. I love just getting started on a project that excites me, that inspires me. But then sometimes I don't have the longevity to accomplish it. Sometimes I don't have the patience to actually let it breathe and like grow. And so that's something that I think that I've discovered within myself. And maybe you're the same way, and maybe you're not. And maybe the whole mentality of quitting tomorrow, but never today works for you. And that's great. But I think that's where you need to figure out how you're going to build your motivation, how you're going to build up the desires for your motivation and productivity in your daily life. And, you know, even though the Navy SEALs is an extreme example, because a lot of us aren't obviously Navy SEALs and stuff, because that's honestly a whole other level. I wouldn't be able to do the things that they like struggle through. It's like insane. Just like looking up videos about the Navy SEALs and their training and what they go through the 8-month process of like to become an actual Navy SEAL is literally insanity. I couldn't even imagine. But the thing that I will say is this: if you want motivation, if you desire for motivation, and you really want to be more productive in general in your personal life, especially, and in just like maybe even like your small business, maybe at work or whatever, you need to figure out what makes you tick. How do you build your own motivation? And how do you like convince yourself that this is how you tick? Because I think a part of it is just psychological. Because like, we're very habitual human beings. And that's the one thing that's true for every single person. We're very habitual, and we will always have a certain set of quirks that we always have. And we will always do certain things that we always have, because we're very habitual creatures. Like, for instance, why do you think you have bad habits? Because we're habitual creatures. And if we don't actually strive for something better, and not really strive, but surrender to, you know, obviously the will of God in our lives, for an example, right? Then we're going to fall for everything. We're going to fall for temptation. We're going to fall for anger. We're going to fall for hate. We're going to fall for pride. We're going to fall for all these things, because guess what? If we aren't aligned to who God is, like for instance, if you're a Christian, right? And if you're not aligned to who you are, right? That's a tongue twister right there. But if you don't know who you are, then you're just going to fall for everything, and you're just going to always be in this loop of always repeating past habits, whether they're bad or good, and you're never going to change for the better, or to become more efficient in your life, or to become more productive. And honestly, you're not going to have the motivation to change. And so I think that you need to take a step back and just review to yourself, like, what has worked in my life and what hasn't? Because I'm going to tell you now that even just simply, like as I've done recently, even just simply starting to add new habits, just one new habit has made the difference. And if the striving mentality works for you, use it, because you might process things different than me. And I'm sure there's all sorts of other methods and ways that you can actually gain motivation and can actually view productivity in this light and in this lens. But I kind of hope this kind of shed light on the idea that there is more than one way to kind of try to gain motivation and try to gain the desire for motivation, is to press on in the midst of struggle and in the midst of like something that feels impossible, but is possible to actually complete. It may be hard in the moment though. I will be back tomorrow with another episode. Might be another interview. I'm not sure yet, but I hope to see you then, or rather you will hear me. So I'll see you guys. Bye-bye.